Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Lenten Town Hall meeting of Catholic Prison Ministry Coalition. I'm Father George Williams, and today we have a special program called Not Rushing Easter, Preparation for Holy Week. When we're filming this, Easter is about 2 weeks away, and I know all of us get so busy during Lent that oftentimes we forget to sort of slow down and pay attention to what's happening now, not to be preparing for the Easter celebrations up ahead of us. And I'm delighted to have Brother Jesuit with me today, Father Kevin O'Brien. Today is going to be talking about the wisdom that's found in the in between times in our lives, and how solitude, waiting, and stillness can cultivate our faith and our hope and our love. And so the conversation is meant to offer you some spiritual nourishment on your journey and help you reflect on how those we minister to in prison live in the waiting of Holy Week, and how embracing the pause can also open the path for Easter renewal. Now, Kevin is a Jesuit priest and educator. He is serving currently as the executive director of a wonderful, innovative program called Fairfield Bellarmine. And what that is started at Fairfield University, and they're offering 2-year associate's degrees for students who live in the Bridgeport area who don't always have access or can afford Jesuit higher education. Father O'Brien is also the author of the award-winning book, The Ignatian Adventure, Experiencing the Spiritual Exercises of St. Ignatius in Daily Life. And his follow-up book, Seeing with the Heart, A Guide to Navigating Life's Adventures, has recently won first prizes in spirituality by 2 Catholic media associations. Now, Kevin is originally from Canada, raised in South Florida, and he's practiced law and taught high school before he entered the Society of Jesus in 1996. I had the pleasure of living with Kevin in Berkeley for a couple of years, and I know he's also taught business law, philosophy, ethics, and theology on a variety of campuses. So great to see you again, Kevin, and welcome.
Likewise. Thanks, George, for the invitation, and thanks, Karen, for the invitation to be with you all today. You know, part of my interest in joining you was a brief experience comparatively to what you're doing in ministry in jail. I spent a summer as a scholastic, as a Jesuit in training in Los Angeles, working with the Jesuit Refugee Service, and my job was to serve as a chaplain in an immigration detention center in San Pedro, and it was really a formative experience for me that summer. And those migrants had been basically housed in a state prison, in federal prison. And it was really just an eye-opening experience for me. And the mission of the Jesuit Refugee Service is to serve, is to accompany, serve, and advocate. That's their 3-part mission, which in a sense is, I know, is part of what you do too in your ministry as chaplains in jails and prisons and other places. Is accompaniment is where we begin, and maybe advocacy will follow. But accompaniment, walking with, listening to the other, it all begins there. And so I think that's right. That was so formative for me as a Jesuit, just to learn the value of accompaniment. As someone, a former lawyer who, before I joined the Jesuits, I was trained to fix, to solve, and I had to learn in a very humbling way that the path to healing sometimes comes not through fixing, but through accompaniment. And I know that's what all of you do so well, and through your training in other places. So I'm going to spend a little time talking to you about this image of the in-between times, or the Holy Saturday moments, which is what Karen suggested we do, given Lent and we're coming up to Holy Week. So I'm going to limit my conversation to that, but I'm happy to take some questions at the second part of our time together. I want to say I draw on a couple of sources. One is a wonderful new book by Richard Gayardi. He was formerly at Boston College. He died last year, I believe, and he was a theologian. And the book is While I Breathe, I Hope. While I Breathe, I Hope. And it's a beautiful meditation on his dying over the course of a couple of years through his treatment with through cancer and his then realizing there would be no cure and his approach to death, physical death. And it's a series of reflections that I believe he posted on CaringBridge as he was going through this. And some of his students put this into a book. And there's a chapter on hope there, which I find particularly compelling. And the other, I mean, forgive the self-promotion, is from my recent book, Seeing with the Heart. Um, there's a chapter on hope, and so I'm going to draw from that source as well. But I do want to begin with a meditation on from Holy Saturday, because this is really what this we're sort of theming. We put a theme on this conversation as Holy Saturday as the key or the iconic image of waiting in the Christian tradition. That time between the frenetic activity and chaos and horror of Good Friday and the joy and the peaceful excitement of Easter Sunday, you have that in-between time of Holy Saturday, where in the Christian tradition, this idea that in the in-between time, nothing seems to be happening. It's still and quiet. And those of you living up, the northern parts of this country and this continent know that that's in a sense that's what we do during winter. Is that all those trees out there? I'm off giving a talk in Boston, and I'm looking outside my window, and there are these trees which appear dead, but we know they're not. There's sap percolating in the under the bark, and there's life coming through the spring rains and the roots of the tree. But we have to be able to see it. And we could see lifelessness and death, or we could see the possibility of spring, which will emerge, God willing, in a week or two. But with Holy Saturday, it's like we don't see anything. We know that there's something, that God is still active, that God is still at work, but for us, it's still, and we're full of anticipation. So there's an ancient homily from Holy Saturday, and it's in the readings in the liturgy for Holy Saturday, because Holy Saturday for Catholics, we know that there's no Eucharist celebrated, there's no Mass that is celebrated, but there are readings. There's a liturgy for Holy Saturday, and there is on that liturgy an ancient homily. We don't know the date, but an ancient homily from Holy Saturday that has been passed on through the centuries. And you could easily find it by Googling. I just put in a Holy Saturday ancient homily, and there it came. And I want to read for you. It's very brief. I want to read for you just some excerpts of it, because in reading it and praying with it this morning, I realized, wow, this speaks to the ministry of chaplains in some way. So this is how the homily begins. What is happening? Today there is a great silence over the earth, a great silence and stillness, a great silence because the King sleeps. It continues, truly, the King goes out to seek our first parent like a lost sheep, Adam. He wishes to visit those who sit in darkness and the shadow of death. He goes to free the prisoner Adam and his fellow prisoner Eve from their pains, he who is God and Adam's son. This beautiful notion that Jesus goes to, they would say in the creed, descends into hell to free humanity, to free all those who did not see Christ. And now theology has evolved since this time, but there still is this notion that in between Good Friday and Holy and Easter Sunday, Jesus, as we say in the Apostles' Creed, descended into hell to free all those who did not know Christ. And again, what that looks like or how that happened, or just we could bracket that for a second. But I just like for us to reflect on the poetry of this beautiful meditation. Truly, he seeks out our first parent like a lost sheep. And notice the prisoner language. He wishes to visit those who sit in darkness and the shadow of death. He goes to free the prisoner Adam and his fellow prisoner Eve from their pains. He who is God, Adam's son. And grasping his hand, he raises Adam up, saying, Awake, O sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give you light. I am your God, who for your sake became your son, who for you and your descendants now speak and command with authority those in prison, come forth, and those in darkness have light, and those who sleep rise. Repeat that last line again. I have come now to speak and command with authority those in prison, come forth, and to those in darkness have light, and to those who sleep rise. Pretty powerful. To maybe as an image of your ministry, you carry on the ministry of Christ as a consoler. And here in this very dramatic time, consoling, Adam and Eve, and you could, any human being could be in the name of Adam and Eve here. To those in darkness, I give you light. To those in prison, I say, come forth. To those who sleep, rise. I mean, our ministry during those Holy Saturday times is to be with people, to go where they are. And that's a very, theologically, that's a very dramatic move that Christ doesn't just immediately go to heaven, right? That he says, no, I got to make sure everyone's coming with me. And this notion that before he ascends to heaven, before he is risen, he goes to the netherworld or whatever this was to bring light to those in darkness, as he did when he was walking the earth, to call forth like Lazarus out of the tomb, call forth those in prison. But he's got to go there. Just as Jesus, when he walked the earth, did not make people come to him, he went to their homes. He went to where they were. He got close to them. In this in-between moment, he goes into the darkness. And all of us know in our ministry that we go to those who are imprisoned or incarcerated, and we're just with them. And we want to offer that encouraging word about, rise up and come forth. Now, we know we cannot necessarily break the bonds of their shackles because laws and prison authorities may prevent that. But we all know that the true freedom of the human being comes from within. It was Viktor Frankl who taught us so powerfully in Man's Search for Meaning that the last freedom that man has is how he responds to the circumstances in which he lives. That was for what he said in that beautiful book, Man's Search for Meaning. He said the key to survival at Auschwitz in his experience was for those who could find meaning, who retained the power of their choice about how they could respond to a circumstance. And Viktor Frankl was in the most unfree experience of his time, physically limited by barbed wire and by guns and by control of other human beings. But yet he retained the freedom. And what he did is, during his time, he dug deep to find resources within himself, the power of imagination and appreciation for nature, love of his family, that he was able to go beyond the limits of his physical confinement. So imagine that we exercise, as St. Ignatius writes in the spiritual exercises, we exercise the office of consoler with the risen Lord, or the descending Lord in this case, that we exercise the ministry of consolation. I mean, that's why we do our work, all of us here in ministry. That's why we do our work here in prisons. And what's so beautiful is you go to where they are, to sit with them, to listen to them, to accompany them, and then to maybe to offer that word, rise up, have light come forth. I think we all know in our experience that, and I learned this much too late in life, but I'm learning now that what people uh, whom we serve in a company are not seeking eloquence or an easy answer. Um, they are seeking a presence. They're seeking, what we would say is solidarity, right? That they want someone to be with them, not to easily explain away their pain because it cannot be easily explained, nor to provide a quick fix because for most there is no quick fix. I'm thinking particularly of those dealing with detention now by immigration authorities, and we sadly face that among our undocumented students and their families. So we cannot give false hope or an easy optimism, but we can give hope. So this is where I do want to talk about hope. Like, how do we give hope in the midst of this darkness or confinement? And all of you are experts in that. I would say that the most important symbol of hope is you. Just as Jesus descended to those in the netherworld, those in darkness, his presence was enough. His presence opened up the gates. Um, and for all of us, your presence is more than enough. And you have much more experience than I do to account for that. It's sort of beyond a measure, but you can account for that in myriad stories. But your presence is often more than enough. But what is it about hope then? What is it that we're giving by our presence? Let me distinguish between optimism and hope. Now, optimism is not a bad thing, but optimism basically says, Václav Havel, in my book, I talk a little bit about Václav Havel, who was the great poet and the artist and that became president of the Czech Republic, the first president of the Czech Republic. And he described the difference between optimism and hope. He said, optimism basically says, um, everything's going to be okay. And it may be, but we also know it may not be. Hope says, listen, everything may not be okay, but but we can still find meaning in what you're going through. What you're going through still has meaning. What you're going through, there's life there, even if things don't work out as we want. So there's a grounded realism in hope. And that's why, Christian hope is grounded in the reality of human suffering. That's why, when you think about it, why didn't the early Christians wear empty tombs around their necks, right? I mean, they started to wear, early on, they wore crosses. They not necessarily wore crosses, but by, I believe, the fourth century or the third century, the cross was the identifying marker of early Christians. We find it on the walls of catacombs and other places that the cross became the sign of the early Christians, which is a curious notion. And of course, for early Christians in Rome, that's an instrument of torture. It would be like us wearing little electric chairs and gas chambers around our necks. But that's what they chose. They did not choose little empty tombs, little pictures of empty tombs. It's remarkable, right? Because we see in the cross, like that's a sign for us not of death, but of love and of life. We see beyond, just like we see beyond a tree which appears lifeless in winter, we see deeply. We have this imagination which allows us to see life percolating amid the seamless death of the tree. We know it's not real death. It's spring is to come, right? So it's a way of looking so deeply. Hope requires us to look so deeply. And in the hope, we have this grounded realism that says life is hard and there will be suffering and there will be loss. However, well, or I should say, and there will be life that follows that. It's holding those two things in common. So the pathway, we can't get to the empty tomb or Easter Sunday without the cross. That's why we adopted it. It's the path to our salvation, which is just simply means union with God and others. That the cross, suffering, death, limit, loss, all that stuff, that's the pathway. That's the entryway. And so our hope is not naive, groundless optimism. Oh, everything's going to be okay. We all know how annoying that is to hear when we know it won't be. But boy, when we say everything may not be okay, and I know it's hard, but I promise to be with you in it. That's what hope sounds like without mentioning the word hope. And let me share with you again, this is When I Breathe, I Hope. This book by Richard Gayarditz. Let me just read for you a passage. Again, it's a part of the book where he's just received, basically, he's been told the chemo is not going to work. And he describes how what relying on the Jesuit theologian Karl Rahner, who described hope as in a sense of clearing the brush. It's like it gets rid of all those easy explanations, and we're left with this, in a sense, with a lack of control. All the easy answers are gone. All of our plans are gone. All of our quick fixes, they're all gone. And we dare, as Karl Rahner says, we dare to commit ourselves to that which is radically beyond human control, which he would say we learn in those moments of loss, those Holy Saturday moments. We learn the value in the attraction and it can be scary too, of course, of understanding that we are part of holy mystery. We are part of something much larger than ourselves. I mean, he puts it this way, Gayardi does. I'll read you this paragraph. As my optimism wanes regarding the possibility of current medical therapies, again, optimism's okay. Listen, I'm optimistic the Yankees are going to do well this year because I've got data to prove that, right? So nothing wrong with being optimistic. But
Don't forget you're in
sometimes,
Boston right now.
oh, sorry. I'm optimistic that the Red Sox will not have a very good. Okay.
That's
As my optimism wanes about the possibility of current medical therapies holding my cancer at bay, this pessimism clears the spiritual space that can be filled with either despair or hope. The tug towards despair is more beguiling and persistent. Of course, we all know that in our own personal life. And we know those we serve in incarceration, particularly those serving for long periods of time, or for those facing a penalty of death. We know the temptation to despair is very real. Despair feeds on the latest bad news and often feels like the only realistic response to my current circumstances. Fair enough. But he continues, the more demanding alternative, genuine hope, which means grounded hope, sweeps away the detritus, the debris of optimism's cherished plans and expectations. It clears space for a deeper yearning, a longing for something more ultimate and lasting, the gracious love of God as my final destiny. Now, that all sounds really nice, harder to live in practice. But what he does here is so beautifully tie hope to love, which of course St. Paul does. Faith, hope, and love are the greatest. I mean, the theological virtues, faith, hope, and love. And the reason we have hope is that we believe that love doesn't end, that no matter the limit of our physicality, no matter the limits of our body, no matter the limits that we are confined to, no matter our social banishment, that love is still there. And by facing reality, we can finally make room for this love which is beyond myself, to experience the love of family and friends, to experience the ministerial love of their chaplain, to experience the love of God that has for them, that needs to probably break down perhaps a lot of self-hatred or self-struggle. But the thing is that you and I have to accompany people in that. And there's no way that we can provide the perfect homily or the perfect word that's going to get them there. We sit by them. It took Gayardi a year of cancer diagnosis to write that sentence. And it may take us some time as we sort of make sense of what it looks like. But hope always, as the poet Alexander Pope wrote, hope springs eternal in the human breast. Hope springs eternal. hope never dies, but we have to we have to notice it, right? And this is where I want to end by we have to choose hope, you and I. We have to choose it. It is a gift from God, right? So it's a what we call theologians a theological virtue, like faith and love. It's a gift from God. It's given to us, but we have to accept it. We have to choose it. And this requires an intentionality on our part. And we know, listen, if you are despairing in your ministry because of new policies and regulations and laws that are coming forth, if you are despairing in your life for some reason, because it may be something happening in your family or your health, a loss that you may have had, I mean, despair is real. It's part of being human. Jesus faced that despair. But it's at that moment we need to choose hope. And the way we choose hope is by, again, looking deeply to find the sap in the tree, to find the lightness within the dark tomb, and maybe to be less metaphorical and to be more real. I remember during a difficult time in my own life, really struggling with, my ministry and, am I effective and is this worth it? And really struggling. I was sort of a middle-aged, maybe that's sort of a middle-aged thing about, is it what I'm doing worth it? So I was sort of despairing and I was going through a struggle. And what I learned to do during that time with the help of some wise counsel is to focus less on all the grand plans of like, oh, that's the future, or less about regrets from the past or longing for a past that is long over, but really focusing on the immediate present to say, where is it? Where is it that I find life now? And even in the smallest of ways. And I really learned to appreciate nature in a whole way. I was much more intentional about taking walks and not filling my ears with stuff, but to walk around unimpeded, my senses fully aware. I learned, again, I started to write more intentionally every day, which I found life in. And I found life in some friendships that I had sort of let atrophy because of my overwork. So, I mean, choosing hope is going to be very, very concrete. And so in your own life, where is it that you find those shoots of spring, those signs of spring, where you do find hope? And again, often you will find hope where there is love, right? And you can say, there's love in my life. And again, it's often the smallest of things. So when with someone in incarceration who is dealing with a lot of stuff, helping them, not you choosing hope for them, but helping them choose hope. Where is it that they find life and love, even in the midst of their struggle? And again, you all know this much better than I, and you're much more practiced in this than I am. I just hope that maybe some of these frames I've given you have been helpful as you consider, what hope actually looks like. And sometimes there is, with the virtue, this theological virtue of hope, there's also this, less glamorous virtue or grace of persistence, of patience, that sometimes it calls us to, we can't rush Easter, because Easter, we sometimes need to be in this moment of sort of stillness. It can be darkness, but we don't need to be scared of the dark. It can be still without needing to be filled with frenetic activity. It can be, you can be alone without feeling lonely in this time. In a sense, it's a time of deepening, this in-between time, the Holy Saturday moments, where in fact those moments are perhaps moments where we are learn to train to see and to hear and to feel more deeply in a way we had not before. T.S. Eliot in the Four Quartets, cautions us about not hoping too quickly, because we might hope for the wrong thing. We might hope too quickly, for we might find hope in the wrong thing. Of course, we want to get out of Holy Saturday, because it's not, well, initially it's not a very pleasing place. But sometimes if we learn to embrace our Holy Saturday as sort of this time of stillness and solitude, this patient waiting, I think for me, in my Holy Saturday moments and being with people in their own, I'm tenderized. You know how meat needs to be tenderized, marinated for a while? I find I'm tenderized after I'm hardened by overwork or problem solving. I'm tenderized by those Holy Saturday moments, and by being softened a bit, just like earth needs to be softened or tilled for new life to emerge, so too, I think, in Holy Saturday moments, we can find that solitude and stillness and quiet. We can find at those times, we can then are able to finally see, oh, there is the sign of hope that I've been waiting for. Or there I can point to someone else. Do you see that sign of hope that awaits you? So that we can say with Jesus in that beautiful homily, awake, awake, O sleeper, arise from the dead. Awake, Christ shall be your light. To those who sleep, rise. And that is our hope as Christians. So let me pause there for a moment. I know I've given you a lot in 25 minutes, but why don't we pause for a minute and let it soak in, and then I'll invite some questions. So thank you very much. So thank you for sharing that moment of silence. I'd like to invite your questions or comments, or based on what I might have shared, or your own understanding of Holy Saturday.
Well, first of all, thank you, Kevin, for that beautiful reflection. I think you really do capture the spirit of what we're about as prison chaplains as well. And I would invite people, if they have questions at this point, to write them in the chat feature. But I have a question for you, and this has to do with my experience over the years is that invariably prisoners in the prisons I've worked in the jails, kind of get stuck on Good Friday because they can relate to the trauma, to the arrest, all of the things that are sort of, as Jesus is going through the carceral system of the Roman Empire, viscerally they can relate to that because they've been through it. And I've often found that it's hard to get them past Good Friday into a place where they could stop and perhaps reflect, as you just did so beautifully, on Holy Saturday, or for that matter, even Easter. It seems like Good Friday is more real to them than the resurrection often.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear you, and I see that. And are you, yes, particularly where you are, George, right? You're at San Quentin?
Yes.
Yes. Where people are there maybe are longer, but yet the memory, the body memory of that and the soul memory of it is still
Mhm.
like it's present. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, that's a great question, George. I don't. I'm just trying to think of a parallel experience in my life, working with those who have suffered loss. Part of it is, as I think about my own experience in ministry, is particularly those dealing with traumatic situations in their past, is to ground them, to say, how do you bring them to the present, and how do you ground them in the reality now? And part of that reality is accepting the reality. Right. Of course, you still want them to fight. You can have lawyers, you can have this, but in one sense, it's like, for now, this is where I am. And so part of, I think, George, maybe I don't know whether you'd agree, is the reason why Good Friday is so central is that once they let go of that, they have to face where they are. And that's not pretty either. So there's something protective about going with the pain they know, rather than the pain they don't, which is right in front of them. I don't know. I think you all can share best practices about how to do that. I don't know, except um, in my view, in other pastoral situations, is to gently call them to the present. How we do that, I think you all can share the best way in the context of prison ministry. But I do think, George, the benefit of being rooted in Good Friday is that their hope will be grounded, that they're not explaining it away, right? But the catch is
Right.
they might be too grounded, so much so that they're despairing.
It's interesting, one of the things that they've done for years at San Quentin that I just abhor in the Protestant chapel, they show the Passion of the Christ,
Mm.
Mel Gibson's film, which is just incredibly brutal and violent and really doesn't give you a context. It just shows Jesus being beaten and murdered. But the place is packed with prisoners. And it's like, I've always felt like, how do we get them past that? Um, sort of sort of voyeuristically seeing all this violence, which they're also surrounded with, to that next step. So I think I'd be curious if anybody who's live with us today would like to sort of step in and either address how you've approached that, or if you have any other questions for Kevin, you can actually voice them yourself. And while we're waiting, some person said, thank you for addressing the need for ministers to practice this process, but they try to bring to others the need to take Holy Saturdays. I think maybe a little bit of that too is we need to sort of take ourselves
Yeah.
into this, not just the people we're working with. I think oftentimes as ministers, we can forget that we need to have enough compassion on ourselves to enter into these, to get past a Good Friday and into the blessing of Holy Saturday and Easter.
Yeah, I'm thinking, as ministers, and thanks, Karen, for raising that. I think it is for us to build these habits of solitude, outside of, the Easter season. That's why developing our own prayer practice, whether it's, more contemplative prayer or Ignatian ways of praying or Benedictine Lectio Divina, that to the extent that we can build habits of solitude where we're able to go deep. And by solitude, I don't mean I'm alone. I've had moments of great solitude on subways, but that is, can we develop the inner resources? And of course, this is a whole other um, conference on how do you develop these practices. But I think making sure as ministers that you're enriching your own prayer life, it allows you to sit with Holy Saturdays. So as you all know, how to sit with someone's pain is so hard because we have that thing. We have to sit with someone's pain without taking it on because it's not ours. And if we take on their pain completely, we're going to be of no help to them. To sit with their pain without taking it on, or on the other hand, not distancing ourselves from it. So, wow, how do you do that, right? And that requires great, self-presence and inviting the holy presence into our solitude. And so I think that maybe, George, how do we lead people beyond? I'm thinking about the antidote to that Mel Gibson movie, and it's probably to bring them to the Catholic chapel next door and allow them to sit in stillness and quiet for 2 hours, to breathe deeply, to ground their feet on the floor, to say this, they are present here with maybe wonderful music playing, anything that would allow them to settle and to be still. I do sometimes wonder more and more, this is something I'm sort of toying with is, and maybe it's my own autobiography here. Dostoevsky said that the world will be saved by beauty. I do wonder that is the way that we can draw people away from pain without forgetting it, or from Good Friday to Holy Saturday, is it through experiences of beauty? That's what Viktor Frankl found with, he talked in his Man's Search for Meaning. If you haven't read that book recently, please read it again. He found it in glimpses of nature through the barbed wire and sunsets and trees and physical beauty that he can find. I think listening to whatever the music or art or film or nature or the beauty of a human person, I do think there's something about beauty that calls us to that liminal space where we are more open, that we can see possibility, where before we only saw chaos or heard, um, yeah, just bra brash instruments rubbing up against each other. We want to move to this moment of beauty. That might be another way of approaching it, George.
Yeah, as you're speaking, Kevin, I'm remembering a man on death row who there was no life in that block. It was all concrete and steel, and he
Yeah.
had a spider collection that he kept in jars.
Mm.
And I'm not a fan of spiders, but he was fascinated by the beauty of their webs. And also, they were companions for him. And so, even in the midst of, it's sort of like Viktor Frankl and being in a concentration camp, finding beauty outside, even in the most simple things. I remember that vividly, how he was very proud of his spider collections. And, and he managed in that way to find something to go beyond the grimness of where he was.
I too also wonder is as we're talking, this is a very rich conversation. I do often wonder too about helping them see the beauty of their own body, which may have been victimized. You know, it could have been the initial trauma that caused them to act the way they did, or it just the idea that their body is physically confined and mistreated,
Mhm.
maybe enough to survive but not to thrive. I mean, the Black Lives Matter movement really taught us about this image of the broken Black body and how that image needs to be reckoned with and redeemed. And there's something about our physicality. Now, I'm an Irishman. Of course, we don't really want to talk about the body and getting in touch with our bodies. But I got, as I get older, I realize like, wow, okay, there's something where can we embrace the beauty of our own body? And can
Mhm.
we help them see it? And when you think about what prisoners wear, I mean, there's three or four colors, and they're limited to what they can. There are all sorts of physical limits on their hair and all that other stuff. But they're the ones who see their bodies every day naked, and so it's like, well, can they recover beauty in themselves as a gateway into their soul?
Yeah, I'm thinking to people who are watching this, what you can also bring back to where you work is this idea of how do we make the places we are working in, and maybe not beautiful in the typical sense, but more less ugly, and maybe bring some life and beauty into it. For example, at San Quentin, uh, right now there's this sort of flurry of murals going up.
Mm,
And so the idea is to add color, and we have a garden in
mm,
there, a beautiful kind of a landscaped area when you first walk in. And they're talking about letting prisoners wear street clothes at some point. So the idea is little by little trying to
mm,
get away from the drudgery and the dullness that we've sort of accepted as the norm for prisons, um, and actually bringing beauty. And I mean, we have a thriving arts program, and most of us realize that prisoners, a lot of them just love to draw, to paint, to express
mm.
themselves in music, rapping, poetry. And any way to encourage those things, I think, are good for their souls as for ours.
And for ours, yeah. I keep going back to what Rohr, I have Richard Rohr in my head. If we don't transform our pain, we will transmit it. So
Yeah,
the downside of staying in Good Friday is that we will not transform our pain,
yeah,
right? So we will end up we will end up transmitting it back on ourselves or to other people.
right, right.
Um, so if we don't transform our pain, we will transmit it. So that means we have to leave Good Friday to go to Holy Saturday, and in that moment of tenderizing and marinating,
Mhm.
yeah.
And I think we see that I know the that I've worked with over the years, 90% of them or more have been sexually abused at some point in their
Mm,
life. And women, it's probably even higher, but I really think that's probably about the same for both men
mm,
and women. And so there's early traumas, and they end up acting them out in other ways against other people as they grow older very often. Um, Another area that I find that what you're describing would be really helpful is in helping prisoners deal with the grief that they experience, because just because you go to prison doesn't mean that bad things on the outside don't keep happening to your family, your loved ones. Parents die, brothers and sisters die,
mm,
children
mm,
die. Every day I get a call from some tragic experience thing happening that I have to go tell the prisoner
mm,
um, about. And so the grief that they're experiencing isn't just old grief, it's new grief, but that new grief also kind of connects to all of the other
mm.
things, other losses they've had.
Oh yeah, yes. Mm, thank you. I think Barbara has her
Okay.
question.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to share something a little bit
Barbara,
along the line.
can you tell where are you from, Barbara? And what's
Oh,
your name?
I'm from Philadelphia, and I visit the state SCI Phoenix. It's the largest of the state prisons in the area.
Okay.
And I go with a group that's called Alternatives to Violence. And it's a group thing. So that's what I wanted to share, like seeing the beauty. We can see the wisdom of these people also. It's a program that has a basic and advanced and a training for trainers uh, series. And we meet the last Saturday of every month. And the men themselves will prepare the theme that we're going to talk about. And by this time, they know each other because men who have done the basic and the advanced are coming to this Saturday in service, we call.
Mm.
And depends on the theme that they pick. Like I just could give an example. One time they picked the theme of inclusion and exclusion, and they went around and shared what does that mean to you? What does exclusion mean to you? And then later on, they may say, and then what can I do to to foster inclusion with relationships? But the thing is that they've been together for a while, and they're feeling really comfortable with us, with themselves and with us. A lot of free sharing, and so that they say this for us is a family. This is a place where we can feel freedom, and the things that they share. And just something like that. What would you do to get inclusion? They're so beautiful and so wise. We have a saying that the wisdom is in the group. And it really is. The things that they come out with, they've decided last time we're going to start writing some of these things down because they're so precious.
Mm.
Yeah, it's something that's um, Circle Up and Justice, so it's in that family of things, and it's really a beautiful experience for all of us.
Thanks for sharing that.
And Barbara, what's the name of your program?
Alternatives to Violence Project.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a national, international program, and yeah.
Mhm. So yeah, if we can actually put that in the chat, a link to them for people who might, if you
Sure.
don't have that at your prison already. It's a
Yeah,
great program.
ABT USA is the
Mhm.
connection.
I see Joshua had a question. Joshua, do you want to voice that question, or George can read it?
Either way,
Why don't you voice it and tell me where you're from, Joshua?
sure. I'm in North Carolina, and I was just wondering, the idea of Holy Saturday, and you mentioned Good Friday being something that men and women in prison sort of instinctively understand and feel, and I think maybe the Holy Saturday as well, but maybe it's not articulated too well because it seems like God has gone. And the entire prison experience can kind of seem like a Holy Saturday. And I was just thinking of the on the actual Holy Saturday, the disciples had to sort of rely on each other and sort of reaffirm each other in their faith in Christ. I don't know if you could just sort of speak to that. Holy Saturday being maybe a time of for community.
Yeah, I think that's a great addendum to what I was saying, because I think you're right. When you think about how is it, I mean, some of us have the inner resources to sort of do this on our own, but most of us, I certainly describe needing other people. And again, I don't want someone to tell me what to do or to give me an easy answer. I just want someone to be with me. And that is plenty enough. As I dive deep inward, I can still be in the company of friends. I think I need that. So I think you're right. Here's it's funny, that the disciples still had each other. The catch was they were locked in they were locked in an upper room filled with fear, or they went back fishing, but they still had each other. I believe, my guess is that the women who were tending the tomb sort of related to each other differently, while, at least the accounts that we had is the disciples retreated to an upper room out of fear, however reasonable, and then they went back fishing to their former life. At least they had each other. And Jesus, what's great is that Jesus met them in both places. But the disciples clearly needed each other at that time. Wouldn't we, after suffering the loss of someone we love? It's what sitting Shiva is all about. That's what wakes are all about. But what's wonderful is just as the Christ, the King, goes down to the netherworld to free the prisoner, right? So he meets us on our Holy Saturdays, often in the midst of community. I appreciate, Joshua, you sharing that. It's really important.
Yes, thanks, Joshua. I'm also thinking that, as they were mourning, they were in grief, they were in shock. They really did need one another. And I think oftentimes what Sister Barbara was talking about too is that the power of community in the prisons is really important. And I love the idea or the suggestion, Kevin, of having people come after they've witnessed the violence of Passion of the Christ to maybe have a chance to just to be grounded in the presence of God's in a different setting that's not. I'll have to try that this year and see how it goes.
Yeah, maybe not a
Unfortunately,
film. But I think Josh might be suggesting what they might need after that. It's like, why don't you come together and,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
have
Yeah,
a
I think it's
party?
a
You know what I
communal
mean?
sort of thing. Definitely, so they don't do it themselves. I think
Yeah,
the idea of coming together is really important.
yeah, really important.
Yeah, because I mean, the biggest complaint that I experience that men tell me, the hardest thing about being in prison is loneliness, and I think
Yeah,
that's 365 days a year. But I think it's particularly poignant at this time of year when they're reflecting what Jesus went through.
yeah.
As we're coming into our time, I have a few announcements. But first, I want to thank you, Kevin, for your presence with us, for the beautiful reflection, and for the work you're doing, especially with the kids and the program at Fairfield. It's really
Thank
exciting.
you. Thanks, George. And Karen, thanks for the invitation. Appreciate it.
So thank you again for being with us, and thank you, Father Kevin. Wish you all blessings as we continue this Lenten journey, and especially may your Holy Saturday and Easter Sunday be particularly blessed this year. Thank you. God bless.